Hello there, my name is Adam. I'm a 3D artist and illustrator, and today we're going to make an isometric room of a cyberpunk bar, and maybe just a cyberpunk bar in Blender. So first is first, before we start, make sure you go over here to Edit, References, and you go here to the search bar and add-ons, and search for Loop, and do Mesh Loop Tools, and then search for Extra, and do extra mesh objects. Next thing you have to do is go to input and turn off emulate 3-button mouse and release, and just leave that as is. The other two would just need to be active. Then go to key mapping and turn on tab for pie menu and extra shading pie menu. After you've turned all those things on, go over here and save preferences. Give me 1 second. Let me turn this on. What this does is it shows all my hotkeys. So if you ever need to see the hotkeys, you look down here, they're there. Alright. And now, let's get started. So, let's do Shift A, and let's add an image and reference. Do Shift A, image, reference, and go to where you saved your reference. So let's say it's the one for the Cyberpunk bar. The one we're going to do is Cyberpunk bar 1. Make sure to uncheck align to view. So make sure to uncheck that and then load reference. Do rotate in the x-axis 90. Then press GX and move it over here. Alright, there we go. And the next thing we're going to do is click on this, edit mode, face selection. We select these faces here, X, and delete faces. And there we go. We have the faces we're going to be using. Granted, the only ones we might be using are these two right here for the bar, because the angle I'm going for is looking on the side view like this. And then we're just going to angle it to look exactly like this one. But, in general, we are going to make this bar. So, let's go over here to the little wrench, add modifier. Let's add a solidify modifier. And let's turn the thickness to 0.09. Put even thickness. And there you go, it should look like that. Looks pretty good. Next thing we gotta do is add a bevel modifier to it. You can apply the thickness modifier now. Let's do a bevel modifier. Let's do 2 segments. And let's reduce it to 0.02. There we go. Right click, shade smooth. Go over here. Click on the normals and do that. Back to the modifier, apply it, and it should look something like this. Looks pretty good. Alright, and mainly that's for when we do this, where we press 1 on the numpad, so we can see the edge more easily. But there. Okay, so let's get started with modeling a lot of the stuff. The first thing I want to model is the main piece of the bar, because right now we don't really have a lot of the bar set in stone. So what I'm going to do is model this back part and then model the front part. So let's do Shift A, mesh, and let's do a cube. Scale it down, or rather here, let's scale it in the x-axis to make it pretty thin like this. Scale it in the x-axis a little bit more. Scale it in the z-axis until it's not touching the floor. Just like that. GX, move it into place. And this will be this thickness here. And we're going to start adding a few details to this. Like for example, let's do control. Let's go into edit mode on this. Control R. Like for example, let's click on this, GX, move it a little closer because we need the reference. You can scale it down as well. There we go. We can click on this, go into edit mode, Control R, try to get the center bit, move it to the edge to about there. Then we go into face selection, select this face, extrude, and extrude it to about where the original one was. We can select this, do G, Y, hold shift, there you go. And it should look something like that after we deselect everything. Next, we do edit mode. We add a little gap where it's like bent here. So let's do Control R. We add a little gap here. Control R. We add another one here. And Control R. And we add one more gap about here. Right in the middle. Why not? Face selection. Select this face. And we can extrude it inwards. You can even do it to the point where it disappears if you want to. But I'm personally going to do it until we can barely see it on the wall. There we go. Optionally, you could always just delete the wall there, but I'm going to leave it for now, because we're going to be changing a lot of the size to this. So let's deselect it now, because we're going to add a lot of these little details later. But right now we're adding the basic big shapes. Do Shift A, Mesh, and let's add a cube. Scale this one down to about there. Press 1 on the numpad. And we're trying to make this little bar shape here. So let's do G. And let's make the gap to about here. Make sure to hold Shift. Let's see, is that a good amount of gap? Yeah, that seems about right. Let's scale it in the x-axis to be pretty thin, right here. Let's scale it in the y-axis to about there. And we need to bend it this way, so let me do that real quick. But first, let me edit mode. Face selection, select this face. GX, Shift, let's make it pretty thin, and let's select this face, so this one right here. Make sure you're in X-ray mode, select this face, and let's get it at the same angle as this one. Turn off X-ray if you want now, then do GY, and there we go. We have that little gap now. Though I have to say it would need to align with the wall here. So let's do GY until it meets the wall. There we go. And what we have to do with this wall, go into object mode, select the wall, edit, and let's do face selection, select these faces here. Let's go into X-ray mode. Let's select these corners here, just so they don't get messed up. I want to select these corners here as well. There we go. Now we do G, Y, and just scale it outwards like this. Keep scaling it outwards, so GY as much as you want to like there. We're going to add a gap there later on, so it really doesn't matter, but here. Okay, let's keep editing this. Well, first let me edit this, edit mode, face selection. Let's select these faces here, GY. Hold Shift and make sure they become pretty thin. If you press 7, it should match the original GY of the bar. There you go. And let's do edit mode on this. First, let me do GY just to move this out of the way a little bit. Perfect. Edit mode on this. Do Control R. Let's add a little loop about here. Face selection. Let's select this face here. Extrude the x-axis and just connect it to there. And the angle is somewhere around like here, so it's like barely visible, but it's because it has a little tabletop. And now we have to do, because it is the height to where it's supposed to be, I think, maybe a little higher. So let's just do GZ, holding shift, move it upwards. There we go. Let's do Control R, and let's add a loop about here. Let's do edge selection. Select this edge here. Or no, rather, before we do that, yeah, we need to do it like that. Okay. Do Control R again. Add an edge about here. Yeah, that seems like the perfect thickness for the table. Face selection. Select these faces here. Now extrude. Just extrude them outwards. Or rather, Control Z, right click, extrude faces along normals, do offset even, and if you want, you can edit it a little bit. So let's do face selection, because this edge went out quite a bit. So let's do GY, move it into about there. Let's select these ones, GY, or GX rather, move it out until you think it's the same thickness as the other one. There we go, just try to eyeball it. And then I'm going to select this edge, so let's go into edge selection. And I'm going to do GY, GX, move it outwards like this. There you go. And I'm going to do the same here. GY this time, move it this way. And this middle bit you don't need to change, you can leave it as is if you want to. But there, we have that little like bar edge that I wanted. Let's make those little benches. We're not going to make the person, by the way, so don't worry about that. We're not going to model a whole character today. You can obviously go off of the character asset, like shop on some other thing. There's a lot of like vector assets and stuff you can use. Or like Blender assets that are pre-made of like a cyberpunk-ish looking person, and you can put them into place. But I'm mainly showing how to make the environment. Let's do Shift A, mesh, and a cylinder, and a rounded cube. Scale it in the Z-axis to be about here. Scale it down entirely. You can press 3. G, move it into place, scale it down even more until you think it's the same size as one of these. G, X, move it out. And if you think it needs to be thicker, you can always scale it in the Z axis a little bit more. And there you go. That looks much better. If you want to round off the edges a bit more, because right now it's a little bit too flat, you can always press 3, edit mode, X-ray, vertice selection, and we can just select these top vertices like this. GZ, holding shift, you can move it up. Select the second line of vertices. GZ, move it up. Select these final ones right here. GZ, move it upwards. And there, just leave it at there. And that should round off the top quite a bit. We also need to add this like yellow neon stripe to it, which is kind of interesting. I like the vibe of it. So let's temporarily, though, get the positioning correct. Let's scale it down even more, because apparently it's not that big. Seems like about there. G, Z, move it up. G, Z, to about there. Let's do Shift A, mesh. Let's do a cylinder, scale it down quite a bit actually. Press 7, G, move it into place. There we go. Scale it in the Z axis. It seems like a pretty thick leg. So let's just scale it a little bit more to be a little thinner, but not too thin. Scale it in the Z axis. And let's press 1, G,